It really is amazing how quickly things change, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
remember when streaming video felt like the cutting
Oh,
edge?
yeah. It feels like ages ago now.
Yeah, now, well, artificial intelligence is becoming such a huge part of how we make content, how we consume it, especially in areas like podcasting.
Absolutely. It's moving incredibly fast.
So today we wanted to really dive deep into this, take a close look at what's happening with AI in content creation.
Yeah, we've pulled together some really interesting sources. We'll be looking at, how AI is actually being used right now. Things like making podcasts easier to find, making them more accessible,
Right.
the details around AI voices, the whole legal side of things when AI and creative work mix.
Which is getting complicated.
Oh, definitely. And also, smart ways to actually use AI in your workflow, but also some warnings about maybe relying on it too much.
Yeah, the potential pitfalls.
Exactly. And we'll even touch on some pretty lively online discussions about the whole thing.
And our goal here isn't really to label AI as, good or bad. It's more about getting a clear understanding of what's actually going on.
Seeing the potential.
Seeing the potential, yeah, and also understanding the important things you need to think about as this tech becomes, well, more common.
Right. We'll cover quite a bit, like tools for transcription, editing, even brainstorming ideas.
And that voice cloning tech is fascinating.
It really is. Plus image generation, too.
So hopefully, by the end of this, you, listening, will have a much better handle on how AI is shaking up content creation, the big questions involved.
And maybe some ideas on how to use it responsibly.
Exactly. Okay, should we jump in?
Let's do it.
All right, let's start with something really practical, especially for podcasters. Accessibility. AI is, I mean, it's really changing the game for transcripts.
Oh, absolutely. Transcripts are so useful, right? They make podcasts available to people who are deaf or hard of hearing.
Yeah, and non-native speakers too.
Exactly. Plus, sometimes just reading along helps people grasp complex stuff better.
And there's the SEO benefit too. Search engines love text.
Right. And before AI really took off in this area, getting a transcript was, well, it was pain.
It really was.
You either spent hours doing it yourself, like the source mentioned, over 2 hours for just a 36-minute episode,
Which is a huge time commitment.
or you paid quite a bit for professional service, maybe like $70 an episode.
Yeah, not cheap, especially for indie creators.
And those free automated ones that some platforms offered, they were often, let's say, hit or miss.
Definitely. Lots of mistakes, weird formatting, which isn't great for readers or for your SEO, actually.
But AI tools now are getting much better, faster, cheaper, often more accurate. And it's not just transcription, is it? AI is moving into editing, too.
That's right. Tools like Eddie by Headliner, Aphonic, Descript, Adobe Podcastle, they can analyze the audio and actually suggest edits.
Like cutting out awkward pauses or filler words? Exactly, to improve the flow. It can save creators a ton of time in post-production.
It's interesting, too, how AI can be like a starting point for other content.
Yeah, like generating initial ideas or even first drafts for, say, social media posts or maybe even images.
It might not be perfect straight out of the box,
Well, yeah, almost never.
but it gives you something to react to, something to build on. It can kind of spark your own creativity.
Precisely. It's a jumping off point.
Okay, but here's the flip side, and this seems really important. Even with all these cool tools, quality control is still essential.
Absolutely critical.
Mm,
Just because an AI spits something out fast doesn't mean it's right or good or even makes sense.
right. Creators still absolutely need to review that transcript, listen back to those suggested edits, make sure it actually matches what they want to say and, the quality they're aiming for.
Yeah, it's all about finding that balance, isn't it? Between the automation and your own human touch, your creativity.
You don't want to lose your unique voice.
Exactly. That's what connects with your audience. AI should help amplify that, not replace it.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. AI bias. This comes up a lot, and it's a really tricky area.
It really is, because these AI models, like ChatGPT, Copilot, they're trained on just enormous amounts of text from the internet.
And the internet isn't exactly a perfectly balanced representation of humanity, is it?
Not even close.
Yeah.
So the training data itself often has inherent biases. You see perspectives that are, dominated by certain demographics, often white, male, American viewpoints.
Right. Influenced by American culture, capitalism.
English language dominance is a big one, too.
And these models can also just make stuff up, right? The hallucination thing.
Yeah, that's a known issue. They can present information very confidently, even if it's completely wrong.
And sometimes they can generate offensive content, though there are usually filters trying to catch that.
Usually, but
Yeah.
not always perfectly. And another interesting bias is that some AI detectors, the tools meant to spot AI writing, can actually be biased against non-native English speakers.
Wow, okay. That's complicated.
It is. And it's really hard to even figure out where the bias is coming from sometimes. Is it the original data, the algorithms, the humans who reviewed the data, the way it's fine-tuned?
So many potential points of influence.
Exactly. And trying to fix it is also incredibly challenging. Tweaking the training data can have unpredictable results. Sometimes trying to make an AI avoid certain biased language can actually make it sound, well, evasive or even misleading.
So it's not as simple as just telling the AI, don't be biased.
Not at all. It leads to this thing called the alignment problem.
Yeah.
Whose values should the AI align with? It's a huge philosophical and technical challenge.
So maybe the goal isn't eliminating bias entirely, because that might be impossible.
Right. It's more about working towards fairness and trying to align AI behavior with broadly accepted human values, whatever those might be, which is still pretty ambiguous.
Yeah. And our sources listed like a whole range of biases to be aware of: cognitive ones, societal ones, cultural bias, bias in the data set itself.
Confirmation bias, demographic bias, political bias, linguistic. It's a long list.
It really makes you think about the underlying assumptions baked into the technology, like the cultural difference between individualism, which is big in American tech culture, versus more collectivist viewpoints.
Absolutely. And there are even exercises you can do, like comparing different chatbots, giving them specific personas, or analyzing the images AI generates for certain professions to see these biases in action. It's quite revealing.
It sounds like awareness is the first big step for creators using these tools.
Definitely. Being critical of the output is key.
Now, related to ethics, but maybe more on the corporate side, one source mentioned Dell Technologies.
Yeah, just briefly. They talk about believing in AI's potential for good, but stressing the need for, responsible development and use, setting ethical principles.
Kind of setting a baseline expectation for tech companies.
Exactly. It puts the onus on the developers too, not just the users.
Okay, let's zoom in on a really specific application: voice cloning. You mentioned Respeecher earlier, the company involved with The Mandalorian.
That's right. Their work highlights some really specific ethical questions around AI voices.
So how does their tech work exactly? Is it just text-to-speech?
No, it's actually more complex. They focus on speech-to-speech. The idea is to create a super realistic clone of a specific person's voice.
So capturing their performance, their accent, everything.
Exactly. It's not just reading text. It's
Yeah.
replicating the way someone speaks. Hyper-realistic is the term they use.
Oh, okay. I can immediately see the potential dangers there.
Oh, absolutely. The threats are pretty clear. Identity theft, using someone's voice to defame them, spreading misinformation or fake news that sounds completely real.
Scary stuff. So how does a company like Respeecher handle that? What are their safeguards?
Well, according to them, they have several measures. A big one is obtaining clear consent from the voice owner. They also say they help set up fair compensation agreements. They respect if someone wants to withdraw their voice later on, and they try to follow industry standards, like those for voice actors.
So consent and compensation seem key.
Very key. They also emphasize differentiating this kind of synthetic media created with permission from deepfakes, which are usually made maliciously without consent.
That's a crucial distinction. So synthetic voice isn't automatically a bad thing, but the ethics around consent and use are paramount.
Precisely. The technology itself is powerful, but how it's used is where the ethical lines are drawn.
This ties directly into the legal side again, specifically copyright. You mentioned a case earlier, Thomson Reuters v. Ross Intelligence.
Right. That case gives us a glimpse into how courts are starting to think about AI training data.
Remind us of the basics.
Sure. Thomson Reuters, who owns the Westlaw legal database, sued Ross Intelligence, an AI startup. Reuters claimed Ross copied parts of Westlaw, specifically their headnotes and key number system, to train their AI.
And Ross.
Ross argued it was fair use, basically that their use was permissible under copyright law.
But the judge didn't fully agree.
No. The judge denied Ross's fair use defense, at least at that stage of the case. The court looked at the standard 4 factors for fair use.
Okay, what are those again?
First, the purpose and character of the use, like, is it transformative? Does it add something new? Second, the nature of the copyrighted work. Is it highly creative or more factual?
Got it.
Third, the amount and substantiality of the portion used. And fourth, perhaps most importantly, the effect of the use on the potential market for the original work.
So how did the judge apply those to the Ross case?
Well, on the first factor, the judge felt Ross's use wasn't transformative enough. It wasn't really necessary for creating something fundamentally new. On the second, it leaned a bit towards Ross because legal headnotes are somewhat factual.
Okay.
Third factor also favored Ross slightly because they only used the data for training the AI, and users didn't actually see the copied Westlaw content. But the fourth factor, market effects, swung it back to Reuters.
Ah, because Ross's AI was seen as a direct competitor to Westlaw.
Exactly. The judge saw Ross's product as potentially harming Westlaw's market, and that factor weighed heavily.
That makes sense. But you mentioned this was non-generative AI.
Right. Ross's AI was for legal research, finding information, not generating new text or images like, say, ChatGPT or Midjourney.
So how applicable is this ruling to generative AI then?
That's the big question legal experts are debating. It's not a direct one-to-one comparison, but the reasoning, especially around market harm and maybe the transformative use aspect, could definitely influence future cases involving generative AI trained on copyrighted works.
So it potentially raises the stakes for AI companies.
You could. It suggests they might face a higher risk of liability if they train models on copyrighted stuff without permission. It might push them towards licensing data, which could increase development costs.
Interesting. Okay, so moving from the legal complexities to the practical side for creators actually using these tools, how can we do it ethically? Madfish Digital had some thoughts on this.
Yeah, they really emphasize shared responsibility. It's not just on the AI developers. Creators using the tools also need to be proactive
Proactive.
by reviewing and adjusting the AI's output. We talked about bias earlier. Creators need to actively check for that, make sure the content is fair, inclusive, and doesn't perpetuate harmful stereotypes.
So again, that human review layer is crucial,
Absolutely. And transparency is another big one they highlighted.
meaning telling your audience you used AI.
Yeah, being clear about it. Labeling AI-generated content, maybe explaining how AI assisted in the process. It builds trust and establishes accountability.
What about privacy? If you're using an AI tool, are you potentially sharing sensitive data?
That's a really important point.
Mm.
You need to think about data security. Are you getting user consent if applicable? How is the AI tool protecting the data you input? And crucially, you need to read the terms of service.
The dreaded terms of service.
I know, but it's important. Some tools might state that the content you create using their tool could actually be used by them to further train or improve their AI model.
Oh, wow. So your own creations could become training data.
Potentially, yes. So you need to be aware of that. And finally, they echoed the point about balancing human creativity with AI automation. Keep that human oversight to ensure quality, integrity, and, that emotional connection.
Use AI as a tool, not a crutch.
Exactly.
Okay, and Open Strategy Partners also weighed in on the risks of relying too heavily on AI, particularly for like B2B content.
Right. They made a really good point that AI should complement human ingenuity, not replace it entirely.
It feels like there was maybe some initial overexcitement about AI writing entire brilliant articles by itself.
Definitely. They called it magical thinking back in 2023.
Yeah.
The reality, especially for long-form, insightful content, is that AI is a tool with limits.
They did list tasks where AI can help, though, right?
Oh, yeah. Image creation, SEO analysis, drafting outlines or briefs, summarizing things, basic research, even initial drafting and editing. They share their own experiences, the pros and cons.
Like, it's good at summaries, but lacks deep insight.
Exactly. Or research is okay for an overview, but it can still hallucinate or get things wrong.
So it's best for those routine, maybe kind of tedious tasks.
That seems to be the consensus. They likened managing generative AI to onboarding interns. It needs careful direction and review.
I like that analogy. They mentioned different models for integration, too, centaurs and cyborgs.
Yeah, drawing on Ethan Mollick's ideas. The centaurs, like AI does a task, then the human reviews. The cyborg is more intertwined, using AI during the writing process itself. They recommended the cyborg model for writing.
Interesting. And they brought up a potential long-term risk, something about autophagy.
Right, model autophagy disorder or
Yeah.
MERV-8. This is the idea that if AI keeps getting trained on AI-generated content, the quality could actually degrade over time.
Like a feedback loop of mediocrity.
Potentially, yeah. Like making photocopies of photocopies, you lose quality.
What other limitations did they highlight?
Well, quality issues AI pros can often be formulaic, bland, repetitive, Originality concerns, it's essentially remixing existing stuff. Data privacy risks, which we touched on. And perpetuating biases, they mentioned the old Amazon resume screening tool example.
Ah, yes, the one biased against women because it was trained on past hiring data.
Exactly. So, again, transparency is key. Disclose AI use. Trust, but verify.
They share their own experience using ChatGPT-4 for content briefs.
Yeah, they found it helpful as a starting point, but said it needed significant human editing, fact-checking, and refinement to actually be useful.
So it didn't just magically produce a perfect brief.
Far from it. And they also touched on AI's impact on SEO. Google is emphasizing EEAT experience, expertise, authoritativeness, trustworthiness.
Which tends to favor human-generated content, especially for complex topics.
Right, it suggests that just churning out generic AI content probably won't be a winning long-term SEO strategy.
So the takeaway seems to be, AI is a powerful assistant, but it's not replacing human insight, expertise, or quality writing anytime soon.
Especially for good long-form content, yeah. That still requires a human touch.
Finally, we dipped into a Reddit discussion to see what everyday creators and users are saying. Sounds like a real mix of opinions.
Oh, definitely. A lot of passion on this topic. A huge recurring theme, maybe the biggest one, was the ethics of the training data.
The scraping issue again.
Exactly. Deep concerns about models being trained on vast amounts of data, potentially copyrighted, scraped without consent or compensation for the original creators.
Is anyone trying to do it differently? Ethically train AI?
Well, that idea came up. People mentioned companies like BRAA or certifications like Fairly Trained or Adobe's claims about its Firefly model being trained on licensed or public domain content. So there's a push towards that.
But skepticism remains about the big players.
A lot of skepticism, yes. And alongside the data issue, there are worries about automation replacing artists and writers, devaluing creative work.
But not everyone sees it as inherently bad.
No, you get the counter-arguments too. Some see AI as just another tool, like using reference photos in art. Others argue it depends how it's used.
Any other ethical angles mentioned?
Yeah, the environmental cost, the sheer energy consumption of training and running these massive AI models, was brought up as an ethical concern.
That's a really interesting point.
There was also discussion about niche uses, like maybe using AI to generate character names for a story, or helping with coding tasks, although acknowledging it still makes mistakes there too.
So specific limited tasks might feel less problematic to some.
Perhaps.
Yeah.
But then you also had people saying AI-generated content just lacks soul, lacks genuine authorial intent.
The human element again.
Right, and viewpoints on whether it helps smaller creators overcome barriers versus just giving big companies another advantage. Some even argued that under the current economic system, any use of AI is ethically compromised because of labor pressures.
Wow. Okay, so really strong opinions.
Definitely. Some hypotheticals came up too, like an artist training an AI only on their own work. Would that be ethical?
Interesting thought experiment.
Or using AI to generate content you never would have paid a human for anyway. Does that change the ethics?
Complex questions.
Very. And specific examples of ethical uses were mentioned too, like AI creating safer representations, maybe generating images of children for media instead of using real kids, or tools like Synthesizer V for vocal synthesis, which apparently operates with informed consent and compensation.
So some models are trying to do it right?
It seems so. But overall, the shadow of the unethical training data used by many major models really loomed large over the whole discussion. For many people, that taints everything else.
Okay, so wrapping all this up, it's clear AI and content creation is, well, it's a lot. It's complicated.
Definitely multifaceted. There's no single easy answer here.
We've seen how AI can bring huge efficiency gains, make content more accessible, open up new creative avenues.
Yeah, the potential is undeniable. But it comes packaged with some really significant challenges.
Bias in the algorithms, huge questions around copyright and fair use, data privacy concerns, and the very real potential impact on human creators and their livelihoods.
Absolutely. And the need for transparency keeps coming up again and again.
It really feels like the key takeaway is the ongoing crucial role of human judgment. Using AI as a powerful tool, yes, but always with that critical oversight, that ethical consideration, that commitment to quality and authenticity.
Finding that balance seems to be the name of the game right now.
Yeah.
A balanced, thoughtful approach to integration.
Which leads to maybe a final thought for you listening. As this technology keeps advancing so incredibly fast, how do we as individual creators, as an industry, maybe even as consumers, establish ethical frameworks that actually last? Frameworks that encourage innovation but also genuinely respect human creativity and rights.
Yeah, and what's our collective responsibility in shaping how this unfolds is something we'll all need to keep grappling with.